Speakers for today, Herberg and Wang. I was lucky enough to catch their talk at the Water Resources Conference a little bit ago, and it was a great talk. And they were telling me that MCES and their predecessors actually have data on water quality going back to 1930s. So with that embarrassment of data, they have decided to look at river water quality, actually with data going back mostly to 1976, correct, is what you have now. But they monitor water over 150 miles of rivers in the metro region of Mississippi, Minnesota, and the St. Croix. Right. And here to tell you more about it is Eric.
Great, thank you. Right. Hello, welcome. Thank you everybody for coming. My name is Eric Herberg, and we are going to be talking about regional river water quality. So the information that we're going to talk about today all comes from a report which myself, Hong, and a few others at my council listed there all worked on this past summer and published, I believe, in June, July time. So maybe some of you have already seen it, looked through it. I will say, if you saw us at the Water Resources Conference, a lot of this is going to be pretty much the same, but since we have a bit more time, we decided to dive in a little more with nitrates and chlorides. So you'll see a little new information there. So first, I just want to go over what the plan is. I'll do a little bit of about us background, and then we'll get into the report. I'm going to talk about one type of assessment we did in the report, and that's looking at medians to look for general patterns. Then Hong will get up and talk about our statistical trends in the report, and then we'll have time for questions at the end. So quick about us, we are from the Metropolitan Council. I'm sure you've heard of us, but the council's mission is to foster efficient and economic growth for a prosperous region. So this involves many types of things. We've got transportation, wastewater, planning and development, parks, and housing. So Hong and I specifically are in the Environmental Services Division, and their mission is to provide wastewater services and integrated planning to ensure sustainable water quality and water supply for the region. So to achieve this, we have quite a bit of surface water monitoring, or not just surface water, but we have lakes, rivers, streams, groundwater, and then also some effluent and spill response monitoring. So now we're going to focus in on our river monitoring system. Our current version with digitized data goes back to 1976, and that's the period where we started looking at with our report. As was stated, we do have data going back to the 1920s, 1930s, but that's all in paper records and isn't quite so comparable. Total in our modern program, we have 5 rivers which we monitor on. So we have the Mississippi, the Minnesota, St. Croix, and then there's also a site on the Rum, and we have a couple sites on the Vermilion. In total, there are 22 monitoring sites, 6 of which have auto monitoring equipment, and we measure all sorts of different types of parameters. So we have conventional, some of which we're going to talk about today. Then there's also toxics or metals, organics, and some biological sampling as well. So the purpose of the river monitoring program, there's quite a few of them. They're all listed there. I'm not going to read them out. But essentially what it means is that we have a very rich data set to work with. So we wanted to dive into it, take a look at what's going on and what stories it can tell us. So that led to this report that we released this past summer. It's called the Regional Assessment of River Water Quality in the Twin Cities Metropolitan Area, focusing on 1976 to 2015. For this report, we decided to focus on the 3 main rivers of the metro area. So we have the Minnesota River, the Upper Mississippi, and the St. Croix. There are many different characteristics of these watersheds which differ from one another. One of which, of course, is land cover. When we look at the Minnesota watershed compared to the other 2, it's much more agricultural. So you can see a lot of tan down in this part of the state. And the other 2 watersheds have much more natural areas, such as like forests and wetlands and grasslands. Of course, that's not the only difference between the watersheds. That's simplifying it. There's a lot of other things. Another big one is geological history. The Minnesota River watershed has a much younger geology, which makes it just much more susceptible to erosion. So lots of characteristics which can affect water quality of these rivers. In the metro area, for this report, we focused on 10 of our monitoring sites. We have 6 along the Mississippi, starting up at Anoka and going down to Lock and Dam 3. There are 2 on the Minnesota, so down in Jordan and another in Fort Snelling. And then on the St. Croix, we have 1 at Stillwater and 1 at Prescott. And the other thing I want to point out on this map is it also shows where Metropolitan Council's 8 wastewater treatment plants are. And the big one to pay attention to is right here, the Metro. That is our biggest one, and that'll come into play when we're looking at some of our results later on in the presentation. So for this report, we have 2 main types of assessment. The first is looking at calculated medians. So it's a simple way to just look at the most typical concentration in your data set. And we looked at a few different ways for general patterns, looking at spatial or recent conditions, also looking at annual and monthly patterns. I'm going to mostly focus on those spatial and recent conditions, but for nitrate and chloride, I'm also going to show you some of our annual and monthly results. And then, of course, we have our statistical trends to look at changes over time, and that's what Wang will be talking about after I'm done. The parameters that we looked at are listed on the screen here. So the ones on the left are the parameters that we looked at with medians and for trend analysis. And the ones on the right are ones that we only did with those median general patterns. And all of the ones in green are the ones we're going to touch on today. And of course, with a little bit of extra focus on nitrates and chloride. The methods that we use, of course, all of our chemistry data is surface water data. It comes from our river monitoring program. It's measured weekly in the warmer months and then bi-weekly in the cold winter months. And anytime I mention flow, that comes from or is calculated from USGS or Army Corps of Engineering stations. And then again, the analysis, it's simple medians for the parts I'll be talking about. And then for the trends, we use GW Trend, and Wang will give more details on that. All right, so diving into some of the results. Here's kind of an example of spatial medians or recent conditions looking at flow. Now, the reason that we call this recent conditions is because we took the most recent 10 years of data we had. So it's 2006 to 2015. And at each site, we calculated 1 median using that 10 years of data. And then we plotted that on this map here. So the bigger the bubble that you see, the bigger the median. The smaller the bubble, the smaller the median. So it just gives you a very simple visual comparison between the sites and between the rivers itself. So we thought it was a very easy way to convey this kind of information. So with flow, it's quite simple. Starting off with an easy one, as the rivers move through the watershed, you have more sources of flow coming in, so your flow is increased. The next parameter is total suspended solids. The first thing I want to point out on this slide here is if you see any reds on the river, that means that there is an impairment associated with that parameter. And for these maps, we used, I believe, the 2016 draft impairment list. But the first thing that pops out when we're looking at these results here is that there already seems to be a difference in the rivers as they're entering the metro area. So it's pretty small in the St. Croix, and the largest median comes in the Minnesota River. So we do know that the Minnesota River watershed is just naturally quite susceptible to erosion. So that's obviously a contributing factor. As I mentioned before, there's quite a bit of agriculture in that watershed. And with agriculture, you get activities such as artificial drainage, all that kind of stuff. It increases the flow in your tributaries in the river itself, which can also contribute to some extra erosion. So it's really no surprise that we're kind of seeing this higher TSS value in the Minnesota compared to the other 2 rivers. The other big pattern, which this kind of map shows, is just the impact that the Minnesota and the St. Croix have as tributaries to the Mississippi itself. So like where the Minnesota comes in here, you can see quite clearly that there's an increase between those 2 Mississippi River sites. Vice versa, the medians in the St. Croix are quite low. So where that comes in, there's actually a slight decrease, or it's pretty steady along that stretch of the Mississippi. And looking at aerial photography, this is just quite obvious. I'm sure most of us have seen these kind of images, but the Minnesota and the Minnesota is much more turbid. And then the St. Croix is much more clear where it comes in most conditions. So. And then the final thing to point out with TSS is that on the Minnesota and the St. Croix, the downstream sites have medians that seem just a little bit smaller than the upstream sites. It's indicative of potentially some net sedimentation. It's something which other studies have also kind of seen before. This stretch of the St. Croix, of course, is Lake St. Croix, so you've got a wider part of the river, slower moving waters. And then, of course, the lower Minnesota is dredged for navigation, so lower channel could be contributing to some of that conditions, which allow for some net sedimentation. The next parameter is total phosphorus. And again, we see this pattern where we have this higher median already coming in from the Minnesota compared to the other two rivers. So other studies have shown that runoff from agricultural land is a main source of phosphorus to Minnesota's surface waters. Also, we know that stream bank erosion can be a source of phosphorus. So with that kind of information, it's really not that much of a surprise that we're seeing this higher TP median coming in the river, which is more susceptible to erosion and has more agricultural activity. Now we're going to take a look at nitrates. And again, we see a very similar pattern. So we have this higher median in the Minnesota River compared to the other two. Croplands are the most common source of nitrate in surface waters in Minnesota. So again, I don't want to repeat myself, but I think you get the idea. But also part of the story is wastewater treatment plants. So we do know that wastewater treatment plants contribute some nitrate, and this is due to the process of nitrification. So in our wastewater, we have ammonia, and ammonia is toxic. We need to get rid of it. So they use the process of nitrification to convert the ammonia into nitrate. So we do know that there is nitrate in some of our effluent. If you look at the Metro wastewater treatment plant, which is right here, you do see a little bit of an increase along the stretch of the river. Of course, there's other sources, as there always are, but we do know that the wastewater treatment plants contribute some of that. And then the last thing I'll mention with nitrate with this map is that there does seem to be an increase along Lake St. Croix. So the downstream site median is about double of what the upstream site is. From what I've read, there's been a lot of different proposals for what could be causing this exactly. There are two tributaries which come into this stretch of the river. I remember right, it's the Kinnickinnick and Willow, which are more agricultural compared to other watersheds in the St. Croix. So that could be part of it. I've also read that it could be wastewater treatment plant contributions or even nitrogen-rich groundwater. And now diving a little deeper from what we've shown before. If you were at the Water Resources Conference, this is kind of the new part. But essentially, this is an example of our annual median patterns that we have in our report. So on this top graph here, just for reference, I listed flow, and each line represents a different site. It's not super important to match up which is which right now, but essentially it's just your annual medians plotted over time, one line for one site, and this is just for the Mississippi. And the nitrate results are down here, so really the only thing to note is that there's quite a bit of annual variability. Different years, obviously you'll have different median concentrations. But if you kind of look at it, it seems like it could be increasing over time, but that's kind of something we have to wait for statistical trends to make a valid conclusion about. And then here are our monthly median patterns. So again, we have flow up top, and it is divided. Each column is a different decade. So the first one is 1976 to 2015. This one is 2006 to 2015. So with flow, it's pretty obvious. You have low flow in the winters, and then in the spring, with snow melt and rainfall, they peak, and then fall through the rest of the summer. What I want to point out for nitrate is that you can pretty clearly see the effect of the Minnesota River. So these two blue lines, so the solid blue line and the dotted blue line, are Anoka and Lockingham 1. And those are the two sites on the Mississippi upstream for where the Minnesota comes in. And then all the other sites are downstream from the Minnesota. So you can kind of see a clear distinction between the blue lines and the other blue lines. Just kind of shows, again, the impact of the Minnesota that has on the Mississippi. And then the other thing is that for the sites downstream, it seems like the peak tends to be in June consistently. So there's a June peak here, June peak here. We didn't really dive into explaining why that could be. My best guess is there's a lot of agriculture in the Minnesota, so this could be a signal of fertilizer application perhaps, but I'm sure there's people out there who know more about this than I do. So, all right, and now moving on, our next parameter is fecal coliform. Here we finally see a different kind of pattern. So now it's not so much a story of which river has the higher median coming in. It's now most of the high medians are near or downstream from the urban core. So we see these higher medians downstream from St. Paul and Minneapolis. We know bacteria is often associated with developed areas, so it's not so much of a surprise that we're seeing this. Also, we do know that wastewater treatment plants, at least MCESs, we are not required to disinfect in the colder winter months. And these medians are calculated with year-round values. So we could be picking up on some of that signal of not as much disinfection happening in the winter months, which is why you see these higher medians just downstream from the bigger wastewater treatment plants. And then I'm not going to show you the E. coli results, but I will say they are very similar to this. So if you're interested in E. coli and not fecal coliform, it's pretty much the exact story. And the last parameter I'm going to talk about is chloride. So chloride is a little interesting because it seems like a combination of the two patterns we've already seen before. So we do see these higher medians closer to the urban core and just downstream from the urban core. And when people talk about chlorides, it's usually the story is road salts and water softeners. So those are common like urban sources that we talk about. However, what was interesting to me at least is that we see this higher median coming in the Minnesota River. And that for me was a little unexpected when I first saw it. But then you start thinking about it a little more, and some fertilizers do contain chlorides. So it could be some of that agricultural activity with chlorides. So it's just good to keep in mind that even though chloride we talk about being an urban pollutant, there are other sources out there. And then of course with chloride, wastewater treatment plants are part of the story. MCES's wastewater treatment plants are not currently set up to remove chloride from the wastewater. It is something that's very cost prohibitive to do so. So most of the waste or the chloride that is in the wastewater is essentially just going to pass straight through and into the receiving body of water. And I believe studies have shown that the chloride that is in wastewater, the majority of it comes from home water softening use.
Can I ask a question
Yes.
on that map? Is your monitoring location before or after where Sand Creek comes in the Minnesota River? Is that something you looked at, or?
We didn't do a direct comparison with the tributaries, and I'm not familiar enough with the stream network. I know it's at Jordan is where that site is.
Okay, because that would be also where Raven Stream and Sand Creek come in, and those are impaired with chloride, and there's 3 local wastewater treatment plants who have high chloride in their end. So
There you go.
that could be another.
Jordan is above the Sand Creek.
Above it is?
Yeah, Sand Creek belongs to the metro area we monitor, so
Okay.
this is, I think,
It's above it?
yeah, above. Yeah.
All right, and here again are some of our annual meeting results. This little deeper dive into chloride. So flow again is on top, and then on the bottom we have our chloride medians over time. Our chloride record only goes back till 1985. So here you can see it's seems to be increasing. But again, we kind of have to wait for those statistical trend results to make any confirmation about that. And what gets interesting is when we're looking at the chloride. So we have our median results from the past 2 decades for chloride in the bottom right there. And you can see there's quite a seasonal effect. In your winter months, you have the higher chloride values, and your summer months, it drops back down. So this could be a seasonal effect of maybe road salt use, but also when you look at flow, it's just obvious that it's the inverse of flow. And chloride is dissolved pollutant, so you lower your flow, you'll have higher concentrations, etc. Lower flow, higher concentrations. All right, so I'm going to wrap up my portion of this talk. Before I hand it over, though, I just kind of want to recap the major patterns we saw looking at these kind of median results. So the first is when we zoom out and look at all of the parameters that we included in our report, not just the ones I talked about. One of the main patterns was how the rivers, even before they entered the metro area, had different median concentrations. And that we saw with nutrients, chlorophyll A, sediment, conductivity, and oxygen demand. The other main pattern we saw was for parameters where the higher medians occurred within the urban core or just downstream from the urban core. And that was with bacteria and ammonia. And then chloride was kind of something that was a little unique. So we did see these higher medians in the urban core, but we also did see a difference between the rivers, and we saw that higher median coming in the Minnesota, which to me was a little bit of a surprise. And just a reminder that even though we discuss it as being an urban pollutant, there's other things out there contributing to chloride in our rivers. All right, and when we convert over to Hong now, I just want to point out that our report is available online at that link there up in the left. So we have our full report, we've also got a technical summary, and we do have some fact sheets. And then if you're ever interested in downloading any of our data, all of our data is available at that link here. And now I'm going to turn this over to Hong, and he's going to talk about some of our statistical trend results.
So maybe you can have a question first or later?
Oh yeah, we can do questions now too. I was gonna, yeah. Now we're at the end. If there's questions now, I'll take some. Yep.
Why don't wastewater treatment plants disinfect in the winter?
We're not permitted to do so, and there's much less chance of any types of recreational access to be contaminated to it in the first place, so it's not really needed. So it's, for that reason, it's not permitted and not required.
Does this report look at the trends associated with facility discharge as well as the ambient water quality trends?
Facilities as in the wastewater treatment plants? Yes. We at least look at what the medians from the metro effluent were in some cases, and also from Seneca and Blue Lake, which are our two plants on the Minnesota River. So we do have that comparison at least, but it's just a simple comparison of the 10-year medians. That's the furthest extent we go with comparing to our facilities. Any other questions? All right, so I'll turn it over to Han now.
Which one? Oh, this one.
Yep. Here.
Okay, and it's this side, right?
Yeah, see, I think if you step up, if you go a little bit closer to the table and just wave at the people out there.
Yeah, wait.
Nice.
There, they've seen you now.
Yeah, first I really like to thank you to invite us to deliver this presentation, and thank you everybody come to my presentation, and Eric. And my name's Wang, and I work for Mass Council for 16 years. And previously I did some watershed modeling to support the PCA's TMDL location and support the county. Now mostly I focus on assessment of water quality to look at data, because Mass Council, as Eric said, we have very good data history, long history. That's why we need to not only provide data, but we need to provide some technical information for decision making. And of course, first, I'd like to apologize my English limitation, because English is my third language. So, I'm just feel free to ask me questions if you have not clear I talk. And a few years ago, we did assessment for regional stream, and the same we use QW Trend. This QW Trend technology is developed by USGS, then used by MPCA, and to do nitrogen assessment for trend. Then we use this technology to do only the metro area 22 strain, and including TSS, TP, and the nitrogen, I think, nitrate. So after that's finished, we think we need to look at our river and to say what is change in the region river, because the region river not just region affected by local watershed, but also affected in the upstream, the whole Minnesota watershed area. So next, probably we're going to look at our lake data to see how's lake changing during the last few decades. And this presentation is going to include what is objectives and scope, what methods, roughly about the methods as Chloride Trend. And like Eric said, I'm going to talk about water quality trend for just focus on select a few parameters because limited time, and then provide some conclusion. So because this, my results look at history. This means what is happening in my data show in the time frame in the same location. What's happening now compared with before. Eric's result talk about what's happening and spatial comparison. This means compare this low downstream side, upstream side, what's difference. You need to think about this comparison between the time and what's happened in the last 40 years. So talk about history now. I just roughly go through what's happening in the 2030 area. I think in the late 19th century and earlier 20th century, and you can see sewer due to development of 2030, sewer is directly discharged to the regional river. And we have serious problem in the earlier 20th century. We have almost fish is gone, and we have a very low DO. The smells very bad from the river. And to fight this public issue, this council, I think, built his first wastewater treatment plant in 1938. This it's called Metropolitan, just downstream in St. Paul, Mississippi River, at the lake. And this process, wastewater treatment plant, continued improved in 1966. We have a secondary treatment technology applied. And then in 1984, we have advanced technology, including nitrification, remove the ammonia, and also 2000, we have biophosphorus removed. Those two technologies significantly removed discharge of nitrate, ammonia, and TSS, and BOD, of course, and also phosphorus. And of course, in the regional wide, in 1972, we have Clean Water Act federal level, also impacts water quality. And then later on, another issue I'd like to mention is improvement, not issues. 1985, we have combined separation, combined sewer system, stormwater sewer system separation. This improves discharge of sewer and stormwater to the river. And why trend analysis? This is why how we need to look at how the river water quality has changed during the last few decades. We also want to know if this change responds to our BMP, our investment, or not. Also, what is current water quality issue, if approved, if not approved. Also, what is decision for future. And starting scope, and Eric already mentioned, so I'm just roughly summary. So in this study focused on the 1976 to 2015, and we have many monitoring parameters, but this one only this study will cover 9 parameters, but today we only talk about I think it's 5, 6, and like TSS, TP, nitrate, Fecal Coliform, and chloride we're going to talk about today. And what is trend? So normally we have 2 kind of trend we call. People think about, okay, water quality trend is a time series. concentration change with time. But in the detail, we can divide into two kinds of trend. We call non-flow adjust trend. This means the trend concentration just plots raw data against the time, and you see how's change of data. This actually result like Eric showed annual change like nitrate, chloride. You will see go up, go down, and because there's a lot of change variability in like a seasonal change, annual change. You may see roughly change, but you cannot say what is trend, especially like you want to study a spatial period. What is happening this period? This year maybe dry years, you have lower concentration. This year maybe high wet year, so your concentration could be high. This is why this actually overall trend contribute to your artificial human activities contributed by the discharge by your agriculture activities. For example, also contributed by your fertilizer applications, and also, of course, contributed by the stone and surface runoff, whatever. But sometimes we need to know and how water quality change responds to our investment. For example, BMP. You apply BMP, you want to know water quality change or not. And of course, like a TMDL, we talk about 10-year cycle. And in 10-year cycle, we need to measure again to say is it true or not to make a decision on a 10-year cycle. So what's measurable? People talk about measurable, but I have no actually good technology. But we do this actually provide us to say, because flow adjust trend is linked to the human activities, BMP, exclude what's impacted by natural process. This is why this technology. So there's two trends a little bit different. I mean, of non-flow adjust trend and flow adjust trend, but give you some same idea what's happening during the time of studies. So technology we use called QW trend. The QW trend is developed by the USGS about I think 8-10 years ago, and basically I didn't go to detail how it works, but basically a QW trend divide log concentration into like M is a median constant, and also seasonal change, annual change, and TND is trend what we're looking for, and also prediction deviation and noise, prediction noise. So like a piece of a product cut different piece. So we take out what we want. So the result I'm going to talk about is T and one piece of concentration. So this means just remove the impact of seasonal annual change or other factor. So because this is statistic analysis, so when you plot the trend, so people say, is this result reliable or not? And this is why we need to provide a QA/QC. And this including we use an AIC number. We call it identify the trend it exists or not. Second, we use a p-value. P-value gives you how likely your trend exists. For example, the p-value actually normally ranges 0.1, 0.01. And I think MPC for nitrogen report uses 0.1. But for us, we feel more conservative, so we use 0.05 for this study. What does it mean? This means you have 95 confident interval for this our result. So this is the result, and the same like we just showed you map comparison in the whole metro area. So for QW trend actually is a non-monotonic trend. This means the trend that they get, for example, like from 1976 to 2015, the trend is not either go up, go straight, go down. This is not something like a Tinatau uses monotonic trend. But this trend you identify like trend go up, may go down, and this we identify. This is why first we use the technology first to identify how many train for this parameters for this location, and what's the combination, what's a good combination. Maybe have 1 train, 2 trains, 3 train. So, but this because time limit, this result, I'm show you this result just overall trend from beginning to end. We don't have time to look at the inside, but I'm going to show you some result for nitrate and the chloride. And of course, I also give you some like this line for each side. This line is like a trend line. We just roughly show you results. And so when result number here is from like we calculate from beginning the model the concentration and the model loss and concentration to calculate what's percentage change. So we will not go to detail for TSS. And TSS, of course, improved significantly. It's good news for the region. And improvements, of course, like Mississippi River 34 and 72, and Minnesota River and 37 to 55. And St. Croix River much better, and 28 to 75. And this actually hope the data is calculated again from the 1976 to 2015. And I think this improvement have been recognized by many studies. So what's happened? Because we have during the last 40 years, we see we get bad bombing practice, bad management, improvement, TMDL, and also improvement in the wastewater treatment discharge in the Metro Council also improved a lot. Like you say, this result give you from our Metropolitan and just downstream St. Paul. From 1942, the data from the 2014. We have 3 processes, I said, like primary treatment. This just started off this treatment plan. And the second treatment and advanced treatment. So like you say, when I applied the second treatment in 1966, sediment continued to drop a lot. So what our study happened in 1976, just half of catch this change. So in the first, even you will have a primary treatment, you say when the flow increase, this means population increase, treatment capacity increase, but we have also relatively increased and TSS. But of course, secondary treatment and advanced treatment technology really did a good job to improve. We think this also contributes a lot to the Mississippi River. Like you see in the St. Paul, we have a 41% improvement, and then the St. Cloud we have 43. Just this means Metropolitan just contributes increase, just very limited contribution. Even we have a huge increase population in the Metropolitan City area. So we'll not go to detail because you say all improved a lot. Like both improvement is in the metro area. You see in the Minnesota River improvement 37 improvement, but in downstream as forest landing 55. And the still water improved a lot from the still water St. Croix River and still water is 48, but in the cross-port before the match to Mississippi River is improved 75%. And the next, total phosphorus. And the total phosphorus, as you know, is normally linked to TSS. If we have TSS improved, generally we expect TS total phosphorus improved too. So improvement and the Mississippi River range from the 26 to 59, and the Minnesota River range from 44 to the 51, and the St. Croix River 26 to 32. So same as we say now, because after secondary treatment technology used, we use advanced biophosphorus removal technology. This happened in my studying period. So you say different from the TSS. St. Paul improved like 26%, but Greenhouse Island, just downstream of discharge, improved 29%. I believe this contributed by the reduction of Metropolitan discharge. And so phosphorus improved, of course, is contributed by the state metro area phosphorus bans in the detaching and the phosphorus reuse in the metro area, like Yalong or whatever. And also bad farming practice and TMBL, of course. And the last one, biophosphorus removed. So I was going to show a little bit detail what is happening in the Metropolitan phosphorus removed. So the biophosphorus removed is happening in 2000 started applied. So after we applied phosphorus drop from the 35, immediate drop in the first 5 years, and the continued drop to 2015. So the reduced by 90%. Also, after we applied biophosphorus removal technology in the metro plant, we also applied to different other 6 plant in the metro area. Say this actually total load in the metro area, other total all other wastewater treatment plant phosphorus removal. So you say continue reduce. This, of course, we believe contribute to not only by the regional wide and BMP or other programs, but also contribute by the point source discharge. Fecal Coliform also following TSST and TB reduced regional wide. And you say reduction, high reduction is in the central central metro area, and this actually we believe also contribute by metro area like a combined sewer system separation system, and also by the stormwater best stormwater management. TMBL, like I said, BMP also contribute a lot. And also, like Eric said, advanced treatment technology in the wastewater treatment plant, disinfection technology also improved. But of course, some issues still exist because, like in wildlife in metro area, still contribute a lot of fecal coliform. And the nitrate, I think this most people like to know, and we finished good news. And the nitrogen, nitrate is continued increase huge in especially in the Mississippi River. Highest place like in the St. Paul and this Greenhouse Island, like our Metropolitan discharge, about 200-300%. And the reason, well, I will probably explain a little bit of why the reason increase such big. So I'm going to go through a little bit detail. And for Minnesota River, we have a decrease in Jordan. And actually, decrease is, I will go through a detail. You say first start continue increase too, but late recent 10 years start to decrease. Good sign for us. This is why I calculate always decrease. But in the Mississippi River, continue increase a lot. And the reason I think the change in the land use and the increased fertilizer in the region also contributes increase and growth population and for industrial activities. And also most important, I like to say, like for example, compare with St. Paul and the Greenhouse Island, has increased from 200 to 300. The reason is I think we applied secondary advanced technology. This is going to convert ammonia into nitrate because ammonia is toxic for the natural system. So Wisconsin applied the secondary technology to remove this ammonia into convert into the nitrate. That's why I think this contribute a lot for this one. We can say our concentration, discharge concentration, nitrates increase too. So St. Croix River is continuing increase too. Even increase only still water 24, the Proscott only increase 67. But anyway, in the downstream area, we have a not increase as in the central area. We have a log at then too, we have part trend. Actually, we can't calculate. You can see the increase first few years, but later year, we just start to constant, not increase anymore. And compare with nitrate, we also studied total nitrogen. Total nitrogen is not as nitrate increase because we have ammonia contribute to the convert to the nitrate. Total nitrogen same as nitrate in the Mississippi River. First few years jump, go up, and then start flat. Most start flat or reduce a little bit, but nitrate still continue to increase. This is the issue for us for our region. And then you say, well, go to detail, to show you a little bit detail. This actually I compare with Eric's result. They just plot and the time series of concentration. You will see this concentrations go up, go down, go up, go down. You cannot see a trend. Maybe you can see roughly trend, but this one smooth line remove the variability of annual change or seasonal change. So for nitrate and Mississippi River, we can say actually, if you use Kinetau, you just see long one trend direction. But because it provides you several trend period, you say actually we say 200 increase, 300 increase, but actually this increase just happened in the beginning years. That's about, I think it's about 20 years ago. So we don't know why first jump increase fast. Probably I think it relate to, and like I said, ammonia conversion. So first jump a lot. Then most either increase very slow, or like this one in the Green Clouds Island, also very flat increase. But some like a local density before before water leave the metro area already start to decrease. So if you go to detailed trend period, individual period, you will say good sign. We did a good job because nitrate is regional issue for people fighting for many, many years. So when we spend a lot of money to reduce nitrate, like 2 days ago, Eric and me just attended your MPCA's meeting strategy for how to reduce nitrate by the 2025. Target is need to reduce 20%. By 2045, need to reduce to 40%. I think so. It's a big issue. But if you without this technology, you cannot see this start to show the reduce. And also like Minnesota River and the Jordan beginning, why is the increase? Because in the Jordan, concentration actually not increase too much. And late year also show the sign, agriculture area decrease. Same as like the forest landing, slowly increase, decrease. The reason you say not increase too much, because I believe agriculture is relatively stable. For agriculture, not like a metro area, population increase very fast. This is why concentration not increase too much. But only don't see it only increase not too much, because concentration level is very, very high compared with Mississippi River and Minnesota River, as Eric's result indicate. And like you say, Anoka lockdown one beginning with flow in, concentration is very low compared with downstream area. Same as like a St. Croix River increased. For the downstream cross-spot continue increase, but still water flow in increased, start to reduce too. So this good side for us to reduce in the recent years. And the chloride is not a big issue. We say we studied 9 parameters most improved, and nitrate, and it's already recognized as an issue, increase but stable or even show decrease. But chloride, no exceptional, all increase continued during last 30 years. We only chloride data have 30 years. So this increase, you say highest increase, lowest increase in Minnesota River. Because like I explained, the Minnesota River's agriculture relatively stable, and because you have not increased agriculture land use, and still water is highest increase, like increase 100%, but the concentration is still low. We believe because concentration is very low, you increase a little bit, your absolute value are going to be big. It's not big issue, but we need to pay attention because show a huge increase. And Mississippi River increased at 45% at flow in and Mocha, but when flow in the central area increased huge, like look at them 86% increase. The reason I think everybody, some people want to know, a few creek before local dam is impaired by tributary, impaired by chloride, or at least this actually this area contributes a lot. And also, when it continues in the downtown area, reduce a little bit because probably dilute by the not dilute actually, because local background concentration is still very high. And but reduced a little bit, continue reduce like local dam too, and when flow out, and local still increase 56%. So increase, of course, like Eric mentioned, from the seasonal change, you will say most. You say this result. You will say most high concentration in the spring. Winter, the stone melt, the snow melt, so bring a lot of the icing, salt, and agriculture use very stable, but still continue increase due to production increase, and also wastewater treatment discharge. And people told me, and the water softener use is relatively stable, and because population increase slow compared with the icing, because the icing used for transportation highway, city expand, you use more and more salt. And also some septic system in the sub area, I think water softener continue discharge to the environment wastewater treatment. So chloride is a big issue for us, even from our water softener, because we do not have technology. Even like salt from sewer, salt flow into our wastewater treatment plant, same out. Because so far we don't have technology because cost. So not treat anything yet. So this will show you what is happening in the individual period. So different from other parameters, no hesitate, directly or straightforward, continue increase all in a different location. And same as like you say, same as like this blue line is a Volca and local dam 1. Compare with downstream and the central area is relatively low concentration, but increased concentration. Even as when you increase annual year by year, but spatial comparison location downstream also increase quite a lot. And for Minnesota River, we only show one because once I think the fault standing is stable. This means constant. This means no trend, so we cannot show. Actually, we can show it, but we very conservative, not show the result. So Jordan a little bit slowly increase, but continue increase. And still water in the pro spot for the St. Croix River because water is very clean. So any change in a river watershed could be happen. So we have 3 trends for this one. Continue increase last like 20 years, and drop a little bit, and then increase fast. So this means for chloride, it's a big issue for us, continuing increase of all our metro area, all monitoring stations.
Do you know what caused that dip before?
We have no information, but probably because that few years when it compares, winter's not so cold, people use less salt. Maybe, I have no information confirmed yet. So the conclusion is, like we say, we studied 9 parameters. And all parameters, TS, TP, ammonia, fecal coliform, BOD5, over the last 40 years. And continue to improve, it's good news. But nitrate, total nitrogen, and the chloride still, nitrogen still become an issue, but chloride is, we call it emerging state issue or national issue, even the water conditions, because it's just in last recent years continuing. For chlorophyll A, algae, we identify mix. Some go up, some down, because it's a little complicated, because we have nutrients, phosphorus decrease, but nitrate increase, so it's maybe mixed. So due to time, so we only talk about such information. If you need some, you can go to our reports, we can Spatial set a meeting to discuss detailed properly if you like. So any question you have?
Do you have any ability to plot precipitation or temperature trends against the data that you have?
We don't have because the statistic trend, or especially flow adjust trend. We can plot precipitation, temperature, but this two just for comparison. The QW trend cannot do trend for precipitation, temperature, because flow adjust trend. Flow adjustment remove seasonal change. People also ask me, can you do QW trend for the loads? Because load, for example, nitrogen reduction, you talk about load, not concentration. But because load including flow, so this is why still not flow adjust. We probably need spatial technology or other technology to do it. But this actually give you some group increase related to your investment, your BNP. So give us such a result.
Given that the St. Croix is relatively natural, in land use, what's responsible for the 75% reduction at Prescott ESS? Or is that more an artifact of low concentrations to begin
I think
with?
this actually initially we try to link our change, even a time period change, to what's happened in ocean. But because this take a lot of efforts to collect the information, to compare, and so we finally did not have the ability to do it. So we just roughly say this could be contributed by the watershed-wide BMP and the TMBL project, and also best management like agriculture, urban stormwater management. So, but like I say, I did stream, like a tributary. Stream is very easy, and we can say change response to BMP. And for example, in the St. Croix River, I did this TSS trend. And TSS trend continued because St. Croix River TSS, I think it's delisted, right? Or not, sorry, not Credit River. Credit River in the Scott County is delisted. TSS continue to reduce. My train also should continue to reduce, support the delist. But there's one period where it's continued but jump a lot, then it reduced. So the Scott County staff asked me why it increased. So, okay, let's take a look back at what you did BMP. So before reduce, jump, and continue to large reduce, then apply the bank stable DDT, stable EMP. So when you apply engineering happen, TSS or soil was, because you work on this, continued erosion is going to be high. But after the finished project, bank stable, reduced. Another example is at the Mini River. We have a Empire plan discharge point from the Mini River to the Mississippi River. So we applied QW trend to the Mini River for total phosphorus. So for the last, I think, 20 or 30 years, TSS nitrogen should continue increase last, I think, about 20 years because population increase, nothing happened. But total phosphorus drop like step trend, the total continue drop because that year exactly match to our diverse remove our discharge from the Mini River to Mississippi River. So then drop and then slowly continue to increase a little bit because released, because the balance destroyed between the overall water and the sediment. The phosphorus is balance, everybody know. So going to sediment phosphorus reduce, so drop, increase, drop, slowly increase. So every change can be explained, can link to what's happening, but Mississippi River is the current Missouri, so such a huge watershed. Adding BMP, it can impact a little bit, not really show the change. So the watershed wide, that's why it's not easy to link the change for what happened in the watershed. But anyway, results show us improve most parameters. Any other questions?
Well, thank you very much. Next pack will be in 2 weeks.
I know, I don't want to take too much.